All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman, and with February in the NFL, it can be a little more difficult to find things to talk about. This is the most dead month of the NFL season, but there are still some news and notes to react to. I've got 3 big topics I want to hit on, and then we're going to get into the Patreon mailbag. So still lots of good stuff on the show ahead. I'm excited for this one. I do want to remind you before we get started that this show is brought to you by my Patreon. It is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can not just support the show, but become a part of it by gaining access to the Patreon mailbag that we're going to get into in this show. Beyond that, you will get exclusive video content, things like film breakdowns, and beyond that, just exclusive content, period, with my comprehensive draft board for the 2021 NFL Draft. Get full player profiles on every player in this class. If you want to know what I think about any player, and if I've evaluated that player yet, it's going to be available on my Patreon. So if that sounds good to you, if you enjoy my draft content, you want to support this show, this channel, and all that, I appreciate you for checking that out. Also, a real brief announcement. I am going to be streaming tonight, resuming my Texans rebuild at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. That is tonight, Wednesday, the 24th. So I'll see you guys there for that. And let's get into the show. So one really big piece of news that came out over the last 4 or 5 days or so, and that is surrounding Titans offensive lineman and 2020 first-round pick Isaiah Wilson. And Isaiah Wilson, quite literally, is nowhere to be found for the Tennessee Titans. And this is getting pretty crazy. Lots of talk about him being one of the biggest busts in the history of the NFL already. I'm not going to quite get that dramatic here, but it is definitely leaning towards him being a dramatic bust. So Isaiah Wilson was drafted in the first round last season after they let their right tackle Jack Conklin go to earn a mega deal for the Cleveland Browns. He went on to, I want to say, definitely made the Pro Bowl. He may have been All-Pro, but he had a great year for the Browns, a great player. That was a risky move to let him go in the first place, but they were banking on their ability to develop Isaiah Wilson out of Georgia, who was a super athletic, just strong, fast, quick, huge right tackle, right guard prospect. But he was young, 20 years old, and frankly, looking back on my notes on him, I did think he needed a lot of time to develop, especially at tackle. I actually went as far as saying he was the number 1 guard in the class for me, because I really did think his footwork was clunky and his technique was almost beyond saving at tackle, but I did really like him at guard. I did think that was a pretty solid pick for them. But this all goes to show you that you can have all the athletic traits in the world, but if you don't have it put together off the field, you have no chance. And Isaiah Wilson, this is getting extremely wild, and I don't want to jump to too many conclusions here, but all of the signs are pointing to his heart just not being in it for the NFL, and almost pointing to him having other passions. So let's get into what's going on with Isaiah Wilson now that you kind of know who he is a little bit more, because they had huge expectations for this guy, and he's really letting the team and their fans down at the moment. So as early as September in his rookie season, he got a DUI, and that kept him off the field as that whole saga played out. And then really as the season went on, he barely played. He only played 6 snaps for the team. He was a complete non-factor. And then around week 12, he was actually suspended by the team for violating team policy, which usually means late to meetings or arguing with coaches, that kind of thing. And they suspend him. And about a week later, they actually put him on the non-football injury list, which is something that's used typically for family emergencies, for mental health problems, for any sort of basically issue with the player that is non-physical, is not a physical injury. And he ends up not playing the rest of the season from that point on, which takes us to about January, where I saw a report that the team didn't even know where he was after the season ended. So they had gone about that 6-week stretch since he went on the non-football injury list. They didn't know where he was. They hadn't heard from him. He wasn't answering their phone calls. And they were just like, wow, we don't know if we're going to get a single day of work moving forward with Isaiah Wilson. Like, he could be off the grid. He could be, hanging out in Jamaica right now. They don't know where he is. And then you go to about 5 days ago, you see an Instagram post from Isaiah Wilson, which is about 2 weeks after the report that the Titans had not heard from him. And I can only assume that this is the first time that they had heard from Isaiah Wilson. And he comes out with, I think it was an Instagram post, it may have been a tweet that he later deleted, where he said, "I'm done playing football for the Tennessee Titans." Like, what? Like, just crazy stuff. And then within like a day of that, he releases somewhere on the internet sort of like a video with like, I think with like a link to some of his music. He clearly has a passion for music and rap. And there's like a video of him with his entourage of him rapping. And it seems he's more passionate about that, honestly, from the outside looking in, than he is about his NFL career, which is perfectly fine for him, but he's kind of he's totally screwing the Tennessee Titans over, who have invested team resources using that first-round pick on him. They were banking on him. They didn't pursue other right tackles for the long-term plan. He was the plan. And financially, he's making a ton of money to do nothing right now for the Titans. And looking forward, it is starting to look like the Titans have no plans for Isaiah Wilson moving forward. And that's just wild. You don't see first-round picks basically not show up for their team. Yeah, they might go out and get injured, or they might have legal problems, and that leads them to being off the field. But you really don't see first-round picks come in and, to put it bluntly, not care. Like, that's really what it looks like for Isaiah Wilson, is that his heart's not in it. He doesn't appear to want to be an NFL player, let alone a star NFL player. And I would only assume that the Titans, from this point moving forward, are going to start making other plans at right tackle. I think they will view that as a need this offseason. And if they get anything from Isaiah Wilson, that's great. But I think they're well beyond the point of pouring a ton of confidence and resources into this player and hoping that he just kind of buys in and turns a corner. And maybe they go on and trade him. I don't really see that happening. I don't think his market is all that big. I think that they'll just kind of eat it. If he doesn't work out, if he doesn't want to come out and play, then they'll just say, all right, we whiffed. We completely busted on this pick. And if that's the case, if next year he's not showing up for the team, or if he gets traded for a 7th-round pick and can't work out somewhere else, he is going to be in the history books as one of the biggest first-round busts ever. Because it's not like, it's not like Blake Bortles or Dwayne Haskins or some of these other guys where they just weren't good, right? They just weren't good at football. You could argue that Dwayne Haskins had some off-the-field drama in a similar light to this, but he at least got on the field, and they at least got to evaluate him and see what kind of player he was. In the case of Isaiah Wilson, he just didn't show up for the team. Like, even Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, like those big busts, like, yeah, they at least showed up. They at least played, and the team found out that, okay, they just misevaluated the player. In Isaiah Wilson's case, like, he just doesn't seem to want to play football, which does happen occasionally for, like, late-round picks. But for that to happen for a first-round pick that is usually extremely well vetted, this is a huge, huge miss for the Tennessee Titans. Now, that's if things don't turn out here. He still has a ton of physical talent. He's still only 21 years old. So there's still a long, list of options for Isaiah Wilson moving forward as far as how his career is going to pan out. But I will certainly say that at this point in time, it is not looking good. And the ball is in his court. Like I said, the Titans are not going to plan on, vetting a bunch of resources towards him to self-correct him. It's kind of like if you're dating someone, you don't try to fix everything about them. You just move on. And I think that that's kind of the way the Titans are looking at this, where, like, if he wants to come out, if he wants to love us and pour his heart into our team, that's great, but we're not going to pour our heart into Isaiah Wilson after he has not done the same for us. So that's just a wild story. I think NFL fans should be aware of it. If you're not, it's just kind of my stance on it. Like, anything you get from him at this point is house money, and I think they're going to plan on finding a new option at right tackle or moving forward with Dennis Kelly, but certainly not looking good for Isaiah Wilson. So the next thing I want to talk about here is a thought I had on the ride down to Illinois. I was visiting some family over the last 4 or 5 days. And it's a thought I had about a player that I think has one of the most interesting, most underrated storylines for the upcoming NFL season, and that is new Detroit Lions quarterback Jared Goff. I know what you're thinking. Jared Goff, interesting? Yeah, no, that ain't it. He's like the most boring player in the league. He's kind of smack dab, like 16th best quarterback in the NFL, maybe a little worse. As a player, his play style is not very exciting. He's kind of your traditional pocket passer, just kind of executes the rhythm of the offense and nothing more. And I get it. He's not a very exciting player, but there's something I talked about on the podcast. It was either the last show or 2 shows ago about the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, the quote-unquote elite of the elite. The only consistent trait amidst all of these quarterbacks is that at some point along the road, they were told, no, you're not the guy. And I think that it's an intangible thing, an intangible thing. It sounds weird to say, but I do think that when you're looking for an elite quarterback, it doesn't matter how fast they are, how strong their arm is, all this stuff, it does matter. But the most important thing is, do they know how to work and work at a level that can equate to greatness? Because I don't think Jared Goff is lazy. I think he shows up to practice on time. I think he puts in the required amount of hours to watch his film. I think he comes prepared. You don't become an NFL starter without doing that. But he doesn't do what Tom Brady does. He doesn't do what Aaron Rodgers does and all these other quarterbacks that come in and have this elite preparation and elite work ethic. And I think the most consistent thing as you go down the list of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL is they, at some point along the road, were told no. They got slapped in the face and they had to whip their head back around and say, no, back. They had to say, no, I am the guy. And that requires you to prove people wrong. That requires you to be the first one in to practice. So the coach shows up after you and sees you in the gym getting an extra workout in before practice. They see you on the way out, still in the film room, going through, studying film. You force the other people to see that you want to be great. Like, seriously, go down the list. Patrick Mahomes was, the 3rd quarterback drafted, played at Texas Tech, wasn't always wanted. Aaron Rodgers, a JUCO prospect coming out. Russell Wilson, a 3rd-round pick at a transfer from NC State, was too short, quote-unquote. Deshaun Watson, his arm wasn't strong enough. Josh Allen had to go to Wyoming first. Kyler Murray, 5'9", way too short to play in the league. Joe Burrow, arm wasn't strong enough. Injuries, had to transfer out. Lamar Jackson, constantly doubted. The list goes on and on and on. Tom Brady, 6th-round pick. Drew Brees was kind of passed around the league, was told his arm wasn't strong enough. The most consistent thing among top 10 elite Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks is they have faced adversity in the face and turned it into greatness. And in the case of Jared Goff, you could make a case that he has never faced real adversity in his football career. And that is why I think this is so fascinating, because I am really curious to see what that pressure point of him being a throw-in in a trade for a quarterback that hasn't had the success he's had over the last 5 years as a team, a quarterback that's 10 years older than him, has been in the league for a decade, and in his mind has never had the success Jared Goff has had, I would assume. In Goff's mind, that's the way he sees it. But it wasn't just a straight-up trade. The Rams gave up 2 first-round picks. They gave up, a 3rd-round pick this year? Jared Goff was a throw-in in that trade. That was like including like your backup left tackle in the trade, just being like, oh yeah, you can have this guy because you have a new hole there and you need this guy. Jared Goff was a complete throw-in. And yeah, the Lions like him. He's going to be their starter, but Jared Goff knows that the Lions owe him nothing. Jared Goff is going to have to prove that he is their franchise quarterback if he wants to be that guy. And you go back in Jared Goff's career, he's never had, let's just say, he's never been told no. He's never been told you're not the guy. High school, he was the guy. He was in the 7-on-7 drills. I think he was like the 6th or 7th quarterback in that class, depending who you ask. But 4-star, 5-star prospect, went to Cal, was always going to be the starter there. Not that he's lazy, not that he didn't work to become the starter at Cal, but he never reached his potential. He, quote-unquote, did what he needed to do. He never went the extra mile, did enough to become the number 1 overall pick in a iffy quarterback class, was essentially handed the starting job for the Rams, clearly was not ready that rookie season. They really babysitted him along. They gave him all this help, and they were able to turn him into a top 15 quarterback for a few years, but the development was never really there. This is the first time in his career that a team has said, nope, you're not our guy. Good luck somewhere else. And Jared Goff is really going to have a chip on his shoulder. And when you look at his physical talent, he can be a top 10 quarterback. He has the arm. He's not a great athlete, but he can move a little bit. I think there's room to improve, like his pocket presence and stuff, if he really works at that part of his game. He has the physical potential to be a top 10 quarterback, but I think what's always held him back was that work ethic, that desire to be great. Not that his work ethic is a problem, but it's just not a strength. And I think for the first time in his career, that could become a strength. If the cards align, if the stars align, and something clicks for Jared Goff, where he says, wow, I really need to plant my feet in the sand, plant my feet in the dirt for this blue-collar Detroit team, bite some kneecaps off, in the words of Dan Campbell. And this could really be the pressure that bursts his game into a diamond. Emphasis on the word could. That's why this is so fascinating. You're also talking about a player that is sort of California cool, is kind of go with the flow, is kind of, I don't want to use the word willy-nilly, but you get the point. He could come into this culture and self-destruct. This could just not be for him. And there's a world where this is the beginning of the end of Jared Goff's career. If he comes in here and really stinks, look how quickly, say, the career of Sam Bradford fell apart. Former first-round pick, was kind of the golden boy, coming out of Oklahoma. Now, his career was a different route, but before you knew it, Sam Bradford was out of the league in like 2 years. And I don't think Jared Goff will be truly out of the league, but like, is he the kind of guy after he's made all this money that wants to bounce around and play Joe Flacco and be a backup? I don't know how much, if he's not getting handed starting jobs, I don't know how much football he wants to continue to play after making he got $100 million guaranteed by the Rams. That is generational wealth. He's good financially. So if things don't work out in Detroit, he probably doesn't have this elite passion for the game. There's a world where this goes the complete other direction, and he just looks at this Lions team, doesn't have the help he had for the Rams, looks at the culture around him with all these guys, like blue-collar, physical, tough guys. He could look around and be like, yeah, this isn't for me. He could flame out, Chase Daniels, the backup, by the end of the year, and they release Jared Goff by the end of the season, and then he's looking for a backup gig or a starting job somewhere else. The spectrum is immense for Jared Goff, and that's why I wanted to talk about this, because I think this is just a unique situation with a ton of outcomes, and I find it extremely fascinating to see what happens, because I do think that there is a chance that this really, gets on Jared Goff's ass and says, okay, it's time to be great, Jared Goff. You've been good, but do you want to be great? Or do you want to be out of the league in 3 years? So I do find this extremely fascinating, and I wanted to cover that thought. So the last topic I want to hit on here before we get into the full mailbag is a big question, a big debate in the football community, and that is pass rush versus coverage. What's more important? What should you invest in? And what's the best way to build your team? with a good pass rush or a good coverage unit. And I haven't addressed this. I haven't put my opinions on this big debate out there in a while, and I haven't gotten this question in the mailbag for a while. So I figured I'll ask myself a little mailbag of sorts before we get into the full mailbag. But this was a big debate kind of put forth by Pro Football Focus about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a very fascinating conversation. So I wanted to just kind of have an open dialogue about that and kind of where I stand on it. Where should you invest in your defense, whether it's in the secondary or in the pass rush? And really my stance on this is if it was as simple as here's a great pass rush and here's a great coverage unit, pick one. You can have one or the other. I would take the secondary, a great secondary being 5 really good players, no weak links, all guys that work well together, that can win one-on-one matchups consistently, that can't be picked on by the opponent. And I think when you look at the best defenses over the last decade, they all had that secondary factor. Obviously, the Legion of Boom had a good pass rush, but when you think about the Legion of Boom, it's Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Brandon Browning, Byron Maxwell. They had an outstanding secondary. The Denver Broncos, yes, had a great pass rush back in like the 2014 era, but you had Aqib Talib, Chris Harris, a good safety duo. They had the secondary figured out. The Jacksonville Jaguars were an elite defense several years ago. You had Jalen Ramsey, A.J. Bouye, good safety duo. Even had a DJ Hayden in the slot, was pretty solid. Chicago Bears defense several years ago. You had awesome safety duo with Amos, Eddie Jackson, Kyle Fuller, Prince Amukamara in his prime. This year, the 2 best defenses in the league, the Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both really well-rounded, deep secondaries. Even the Pittsburgh Steelers, who dealt with some injuries this year, but they have a complete safety, a complete cornerback group with no elite players outside of maybe Minka Fitzpatrick, but no true weaknesses. I think in the modern game, with the way the game is played right now, if you can get 5 really good quality starters in the secondary and they can stay healthy for the whole season, then that's better than having a great pass rush. The problem here with this whole debate is it's not a fair argument for a couple reasons. It is so much harder to get that great secondary, and even if you get it, it is so much harder for it to stay healthy and work for you at the right times. A lot of teams have great secondaries, but one piece is injured. It come playoff times, and then you have a weak link. And you can't have a weak link. Look no further than the Green Bay Packers, who got picked apart by the Bucs. Yeah, the Packers have Jair Alexander, they got Amos, they got Savage, but their other 2 starters are Kevin King and Shannon Sullivan. And the Bucs went straight at those guys all game. They just stayed away from Jair Alexander. So you got to have 5 really good starters, and those guys got to stay healthy. So it's way harder to get that secondary than the pass rush, which I think is something that doesn't get discussed enough in this debate. And not only that, not only the fact that it's 5 players, although this contributes to the point I'm about to make. Basically, let's just say one great pass rusher can actually make your pass rush great. Whereas one great corner can't alone make your coverage unit great. We just described the Green Bay Packers with Jair Alexander. Whereas if you have Khalil Mack, if you have Nick Bosa, if you have Myles Garrett, it is so much easier to have a great pass rush because they demand double teams, and Aaron Donald. And beyond that, when a Khalil Mack wins, when an Aaron Donald wins, he's destroying the play, right? He's sacking the quarterback quickly. So he's either demanding a double team, opening things up for everyone else, which is not something that really exists in the secondary. You're not double teaming a corner. You can stay away from him, but that's not the same as using 2 players to block one guy. But even if you're not double teaming him, when that player wins, he is taking the fight to you, right? You're sacking the quarterback within 3 seconds. You're not allowing the play to develop. When Jalen Ramsey or Jair Alexander take out your number 1 receiver, the other team can easily just be like, okay, well, let's just go to Kevin King, right? So one dominant pass rusher can actually make a pass rush great, whereas one dominant corner can't do that for the entire unit, just the way the game is played. So that's kind of where I stand. I think if you can get a well-rounded coverage unit of 5 really good players, that's better than having an elite pass rush. But from a team construction standpoint, I do think they both matter a lot. It might be 55-45 as far as what's the most important, having a great coverage unit or a great pass rush. But it might be 4 times easier to get that great pass rush than that great coverage unit, which is just, it complicates the entire debate. So when you're talking about, like, would you rather have Khalil Mack or Jalen Ramsey? In a vacuum, I'm probably taking Khalil Mack because he can disrupt the game alone much easier than Jalen Ramsey. And that's reflected in the players' market. You know, the Bosas, Khalil Mack, Myles Garrett, these guys are making almost quarterback money, right? $25 million, whereas the top secondaries are making, 80% of that, 75% of that. So it's reflected in these guys' paychecks and the way that the league values these guys. So that's just kind of where I stand on the coverage versus pass rush debate. I do think a great coverage unit is more important than a great pass rush. I do think they're both required to have an elite defense. And an individual pass rusher is much more disruptive on his own and is probably more worth the money than, say, a Jalen Ramsey, Gilmore, Jair Alexander, you name it. Not that those guys aren't important, and not that those guys can't elevate the rest of the secondary a little bit by being so great one-on-one, but it's not quite to the degree of a Khalil Mack, an Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett, you name it. So that's where I stand on that sort of topic. I'm glad I got that out this week when there's not a ton to talk about, but it's something I've been meaning to get to. So there is the pass rush versus coverage dialogue. Now we're going to open up the Patreon mailbag. So again, guys, if you want to submit questions to the show, you can sign up on Patreon, and you will gain access to my DMs there on Patreon. And if you want to submit questions to the show, just slip into those DMs, say mailbag question to lead off your message. And that way I know that you're asking a mailbag question, and we'll get to it on the show. All right, here we go from Maurice Stenter. Am I surprised that Wentz wasn't traded for a first or even a high second? And is this an upgrade over Rivers for the Colts? Well, I think that the Eagles kind of know that on the Colts, Carson Wentz, he only has to play 70% of his snaps if the Colts make the playoffs, or 75% if they don't. That's going to be a first-round pick. I was a little surprised that it wasn't a first round this year, but they did get a third round this year. It's going to be a first-round pick next year, I think, in almost all likelihood, unless he gets injured, of course. But if Wentz doesn't get injured, I think that's going to be a first-round pick. And even if he does get injured for a couple games, it's still probably a first-round pick. He only has to play like 12 games, basically. So it was maybe a touch less than I thought they would get. I was surprised that the Bears didn't offer their first-round pick this year for Carson Wentz. So I think that the Colts did a great job. And is he an upgrade over Rivers? I think his baseline is worse, but his upside is much, much higher than Rivers. I do think the players in that building are going to be thrilled to have Carson Wentz, who can move and make a lot of the throws that Rivers just couldn't make. So I do think, there's a chance that he won't be better than Rivers, because Rivers offered a really nice baseline. You knew exactly what you're getting in Rivers. You don't know exactly what you're getting in Wentz, but I do believe that he will be an upgrade over Rivers. I think this is going to work out really well for the Colts. All right, from Papa Rhino. As a Cardinals fan, it feels like this team is on the cusp of breaking out. What pieces, players, coaching, or specific scheme fits do you think they are missing to complete this rebuild and compete? Also, what are my thoughts on Jalen Thompson? I think the Cardinals' missing piece is exactly what it was and what I said it was heading into last year, and that is a combination of line play and team identity. And I put the team identity on Cliff Kingsbury. I think this is a hot seat season for Kingsbury because their expectations are so high. And he needs to find a team identity. He needs to do what great coaches do, and he needs to identify what is it that this team can do well and get really good at that thing. When you look at the Arizona Cardinals, what would you say they do well other than like designed runs for a healthy Kyler Murray? They don't have like a go-to option for their offense. They don't have an identity as a team, and that's on Cliff Kingsbury to find out. But I also think when your line play can't set the pace, can't set the tone, it makes things really difficult on both sides of the ball, offense and defensive line. I think that the scheme that they run makes the Cardinals' offensive line look a little better than it is because they get rid of the ball so quick, and Kyler Murray with his feet can make up for some of those things. But they don't have an offensive line that helps them do what they want to do or can really open up the offense a lot. So I see it as a combination of needing better line play and more of an identity on offense. I do think a better true deep threat as a receiver so that Hopkins can kind of be that do-it-all receiver, and then getting like it doesn't necessarily have to be Jalen Waddle, but if you could move up and get him, that'd be amazing. So it's really just a combination of coaching, finding, not even changing their scheme necessarily, but what inside of their scheme, inside of their playbook, really capitalizes on their skill sets better. That's what I look at with the Cardinals, is team identity and toughness, because the talent's there for sure. Maybe you could use another offensive lineman, but I think they can do some better things from a coaching perspective for that offensive line too. Okay, from Keegan Jones, are there any smaller schools I see putting up a lot of good prospects in comparison to most? The first team that came to my mind there is Memphis. The University of Memphis and Buffalo, both blue teams, do a really good job consistently putting out prospects. What about these schools make them so good at developing players? I would need to do more of a deep dive into that. Both those teams run the ball very well. I think that they recruit really well, and their coaches are probably really good coaches. But between Memphis and Buffalo, I think those are two schools to keep an eye on. They seem to put out good pros. They seem to run a good ship, and the guys that come out of those schools kind of get it. From the NBA Kingdom, in my opinion, the Raiders don't have a great future outlook as they are an average team with an average QB and an average coach. Where do I see them going from here? I don't think Gruden is an average coach, but I think his stubborn team-building approach drags his ceiling down a little bit. If from a team-building perspective they can understand value and how to draft better and kind of use free agency better, I think they've done some bad things through free agency as well. I don't think LaMarcus Joyner, to play him at slot corner, was a great use of resources. Tyrell Williams didn't work out. They signed Carl Nassib, who just didn't really have a path to playing time. They signed Corey Littleton to a ton of money. He has not been the player that they wanted. So, I think free agency and the draft, they've just done a really bad job with the resources they've had to drag that down. They need to get better from a front office point of view. That is my problem with the Raiders. They have a really well-rounded roster. I actually think Gruden is a great coach. He's one of the better offensive-minded guys in the league. I've been really impressed with what they've done schematically and how they've made Derek Carr look really good. But the talent they need more upside. They've got the depth, but they need to find out more talent. And I agree, their future outlook this offseason is really important for them. They need to get some more talent in the building there, absolutely. All right, from Bryce Chapman. Assuming both are healthy all year, who has the better season, Dak or Wentz? I'm still going to go with Dak. I mean, he's got great receivers. I think he'll be back in Dallas. Team success, I think Wentz might have more team success. And I think Wentz has the physical talent to become a better quarterback than Dak, as I once viewed him as. But I think Dak's in a great position. I think he'll have a chip on his shoulder because I do think he probably gets franchise tagged again coming off that injury. So I think Dak has a quote-unquote better season. But I could see Wentz having a better team success. All right, from Bailey Rowland. It's a bit of a multi-layered question, so please just pick out the parts that you wish to discuss. All right, this might take a little bit, but you guys can bear with me. What percentage of a front office's decision-making takes into account appeasing their fan base? I don't think that comes into play really at all. I will say that GMs can potentially make decisions selfishly a little bit. I think a good example is like the Chicago Bears. Like, those guys are on the hot seat, right? They know, like, they got to, at some point here, they got to make a move for a quarterback. And I think a GM that maybe just got that job might take a different approach as far as like a long-term higher upside option, whereas the Bears might be like, maybe they give up draft capital to go get Mac Jones, and maybe that's not the best thing for them to do for their future. You know, I think selfishly guys can kind of get in the way of team building sometimes. I don't think they give a crap what the fans think, to be completely honest. I think most front offices say, we're going to do what we think is best for the team to win, and the fans will eventually be on our side if we win. I think that's kind of the approach they take. Say you were put the role of a GM for Detroit for a 10-year contract, would I completely gut the team and implement my own philosophy? No, I wouldn't gut the team because they got some young talent. I like Hawkinson, I like Ragnow, I like Taylor at left tackle. Defensively, they got to figure out some things. I would take kind of the same approach they're taking, which is this is a 3-4 year rebuild. I don't think it would be healthy for Detroit to take the Dolphins route and just trade away all their good players and just really suck for a year. I think that would make things worse. I think building a culture does require winning. And when you trade away all these good players, and the Lions now have more good players than, say, the Browns or the Dolphins did when they kind of took that approach. The Lions are in a really tough spot, but I don't think I would take the approach of we are going to, like, literally tear this thing from the absolute roots and rebuild it entirely. I think it's more of a 2 or 3 year rebuild than a 5 or a 6 year rebuild in that light. Thanks for the questions, Bailey. From JOR. If you're the GM of a QB-deficient rebuilding team without a premium pick, such as the Panthers, Eagles, or Lions, would I consider trading my first-rounder this year for draft capital for the next 2 years and use that future capital to try and trade for a top pick in 2022 for a quarterback? Yeah, I would totally think about doing that. I still want to get a good player this year, but I think there's a lot of realistic situations where you can move down to like the 20s. I don't know the team exactly. Maybe it's Pittsburgh or Chicago or something like that. You can move down to the 20s and get their first rounder next year. That's what I would be trying to do. I still want to get a good player this year because you just don't always know for the future, and you want to make sure you get fair value back. But yeah, I would totally look to do that if you need to figure out that quarterback situation. Man, I don't know what's going on out there. A lot of sirens. From Nicholas Craig, who was the worst actual starting quarterback in the NFL last year? Ooh, man. Wow. I mean, Wentz is definitely an option there. Let's just say guys that started like 5 or 6 games. It might be Carson Wentz. I think Alex Smith was like, you never want to say anything bad about Alex Smith because the story is incredible, and I'm glad he won Comeback Play of the Year. But he was actually really freaking bad. Like, he was hard to watch. He couldn't really throw the ball more than 10 yards. He couldn't move all that well. So he comes to my mind. You say Cam Newton, Sam Darnold, Drew Lock. Yeah, Darnold was definitely up there. I would say it's either Alex Smith, Darnold, or those names, Cam Newton, Lock, and Sam Darnold were in the mailbag question, by the way. I don't think Cam Newton's in that debate. I would say, in some order, Wentz, Darnold, and Alex Smith, unfortunately. Okay, from Luke Dale. Oh, technically said mailbag question, but let me just respond to this on the fly here. He was wondering if this is the correct place to submit a mailbag question, which does function as a mailbag question. Okay. From Chris, I think the Cowboys need to trade Amari Cooper. What do you think of that? I don't think they can afford to trade Amari Cooper. He's got a lot of guarantees on that contract. They just paid him last year. I think that'd be too much dead cap. I don't see that working out for them as far as clearing the pros and cons of, if the idea is you're trading him because you got a clear cap space, which I understand, I think they just give him like $60 million guaranteed. Like, you're not going to clear up all that much cap space, I can imagine. But I don't think they need to trade Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper is special. Okay, from Marshall, with the Chargers' new hire, how do I envision them using Joey Bosa? Stay 4-3 or go 3-4? So the Rams last year, they hired Brandon Staley, who's the Rams defense coordinator. The Rams did actually run a lot of multiple, and they actually went as far as using Aaron Donald as an edge a lot of times. They will be a base 3-4 defense, but they're going to be very hybrid. And Joey Bosa, you want to craft your front around what he does, and that is playing 5 technique with his hand in the dirt. Now, he can slide inside, of course, on some pass rush downs, but when it comes to third down, I'd be very surprised if Joey Bosa doesn't have his hand in the dirt outside of the tackle. Whatever base scheme they want to run. 4-3 versus 3-4, there's some underlying philosophies there, but for the most part, you can slide those around. We're seeing more and more teams get multiple. The Brandon Staley defense is much more focused on what's the secondary doing. I think that's the way he views his defenses. Front seven is going to be the front seven. We're going to be in base nickel most of the time, which is going to be two interior linemen, 2 edge guys, 2 linebackers. It doesn't really matter where their hand is in the dirt or if they're standing up. But what he looks at is that 2 high, cover 4, mix in some man coverage, cover 2, some cover 3, the Vic Fangio defense. But I think Joey Bosa is going to be Joey Bosa. He's going to be an edge defender. He's going to maybe stand up on some earlier downs. If they go base 3-4, I think he is an outside linebacker. I think he could actually, kick some ass playing that as a run defender. But for the most part, you're looking at Bosa playing edge. He might slide inside. He might play, inside shade of the tackle and some base 3-4. They might do some creative things for him. But at the end of the day, he's going to be an edge rusher. So it'll be fun to see how they use him. All right, from Jagonathan. Really liked your breakdown of the 3 broad types of offenses. Could you make a similar classification for defenses of various teams into 3-4 broad categories? Just collecting my thoughts again. So I think that pairs well with what I just said. 3-4, 4-3, that's dying off a little bit. It's still important as far as is your front a 3-4 or a 4-3, but I think the way teams are thinking is much more directed towards what's our approach as far as our coverage calls. Are we a man team? Are we a zone team? Or are we a zone match team? I think that's probably the biggest distinction between whether you're 3-4 or 4-3 defense. Are you going to be like the Dolphins, the Patriots have been, what the Lions were with Patricia, the Texans, a lot of man coverage, run 50% man coverage, a lot of cover 1. One thing a lot of people don't realize is cover 2 man is extremely rare in the NFL. That's almost a prevent defense or for like really third and long. Most teams only run in 2 man, cover 2 man, like 2-3% of the time. But cover 1 is extremely popular in man-heavy schemes. Then you get teams like, say, the Chiefs, the Saints, a little bit of that Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio defense. Some of these teams are very zone match oriented, a lot of cover 4. If they run cover 3, they're going to have match concepts where you're kind of dropping into a zone, but then you're picking someone up, and that converts into man coverage. And that's getting more and more popular these days with the way these modern defenses work. And then you get your more traditional zone-heavy schemes. And that's going to be either your Seattle cover 3, where they're dropping into cover 3 50, 60% of the game, mixing in some different looks. And like Eberflus, Zimmer, the Bengals, some of these, I guess your Mike Zimmer defenses are running a lot of zone coverage, more traditional, but they like to really mix things up. So that's really the 3 broad types of defenses, I would say, is man-oriented defenses, match zone coverages and zone heavy defenses. All right, from Parsons, please, Panthers. Why do I like Najee Harris? I don't see speed or anything elite about his game. He's like Le'Veon Bell. I think he's got good top speed. I really do. I think he's got some deceptive speed, which I think really goes towards, like, if you're more of a slow starter, I think, guys can take bad angles, and once you reach that top speed, it can really stand out. All right, next up from Costa. With the overarching theme, it's a long question, so bear with me. With the overarching theme of much of your football analysis being how is a certain team going to win a Super Bowl, and with the fact that Tua has done nothing to inspire confidence that he can bring anything more than a good middling QB, why haven't you mocked a QB to the Dolphins at 3 yet in any of your What I Would Do mock drafts? If the Jets moronically chose to stick with Sam Darnold, wouldn't it be idiotic for the Dolphins to choose Tua over Wilson? And so on and so forth. I agree. If Zach Wilson is there at number 3, I would be mocking Zach Wilson. The difference is, just as I wasn't super high on Tua last year, I'm not super high on Fields or Lance. I'm not so sure that those guys are going to be even as good as Tua. They technically have more upside because of arm strength or whatever. But I agree. If they can get a home run prospect like Wilson or Lawrence in this draft, I would do that. I would do what the Dolphins or what the Cardinals did with Josh Rosen when they moved on from him and took Kyler Murray. The thing is, Kyler Murray was as far as quarterbacks are concerned, he was a blue chip quarterback prospect. I think Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence are comparable as far as he looks like he could be that dude. But I don't think it's very likely that A, the Jets would trade with the Dolphins so that they could do that because it's interdivision, or B, that Zach Wilson isn't going number 2. So I just don't think it's very realistic for the Dolphins to end up with Zach Wilson. I'm not high enough on Fields or Trey Lance, even though I like them in certain lights. I don't think they're good enough to give up on Tua quite yet. So that answers that question, I think. All right, from Robert Sterling. Just join your Patreon. Love the content and the hard work you put into your videos. Thank you, Robert. My question is, being a diehard Raiders fan, what can we do this offseason to make us a heavy playoff contender? I know the defense needs a lot of work. We've got a lot of Raiders fans out there, which is cool to see. I think the Raiders need to obviously hit. I think their offense is fine. I really think their offense is fine. If the defense could become a serviceable unit, I think they could be a very legitimate threat for the playoffs. They wouldn't be like Super Bowl favorites or anything, but similar to like the Colts last year or say the Rams, like kind of in that group of really good playoff teams. If a couple things go their way, then they could win a Super Bowl. Maybe the Seahawks. Because I think their offense is good, right? It's a top 10 unit. They got a ton of playmakers, good offensive line. They have a functional quarterback, a really good playmaker. I really don't think they need to do too much offensively. Just stay healthy, get Henry Ruggs going a little more. Defensively, it's like they probably need to bring in a top defensive free agent. Maybe it's Richard Sherman, who's going to be familiar with this new defense they're running. They brought in Gus Bradley, so it's going to be the cover 3 Seattle defense. Maybe it's A.J. Bouye, reunite him with Bradley, who he had in Jacksonville, I'm pretty sure. Maybe it's upgrade at corner there. Maybe they move LaMarcus Joyner to free safety finally. You move Jonathan Abram down into that box safety role, playing that Cam Chancellor role. So upgrade the secondary would actually be pretty easy if you got a Bouye or a Sherman. And then maybe you could attract a Clowney or a Carl Lawson, kind of a high-end number 2, and then you use that first-round pick and hit on, say, Kwity Paye or Gregory Rousseau or something. And if you could upgrade both of those edge positions, because Crosby and Nassib and Furl, those guys are pieces, but I don't really love either of them as full-time 3-down pass rushers. So there's some things they could do. I think their linebacking core is fine. But you definitely need at least one edge, at least one corner, and I love the idea of sliding LaMarcus Joyner up to free safety to be kind of their Quadre Diggs in that free safety Earl Thomas role of this defense. But they just need to upgrade their talent on defense, and they're not. It's not like they're super far away. Because getting for them, it's not like, oh, just go get Patrick Mahomes, go get Justin Herbert, go get Deshaun. I don't think they can get enough pieces for Watson. It's not as simple as just get an elite quarterback. Like, they kind of need a perfect roster to win a Super Bowl with that team. From Raging Crocodile, I was wondering what my thoughts were on the Seattle Shane Waldron hire. Well, I got that question last podcast, Raging Crocodile, so I'm not going to answer it too long for everyone else here, but I like it. I think it's a great scheme fit for Russell Wilson. I think it perfectly fits his vertical passing ability, his mobility, and if they have to go with that old school approach of run the ball and take deep shots, better to do it in the Shanahan offense than whatever the hell Pete Carroll's been trying. So if you want to hear more, I think that was last podcast we talked about Shane Waldron. From Ethan, thoughts on Mariota's future? He looked really good in one game. He played this year, but I don't know if it was just one lucky game. I do think, kind of like we talked about with Jared Goff, like when you're told no, you can flip a switch. Like it happened with Ryan Tannehill. You can get that chip on your shoulder and change things about your game. You can recognize, okay, I got these issues. They were bad enough to make me lose my starting job. I really need to bunker down and work on these things. And I thought in the one game that Mariota played, he was playing with much more swagger, and it's not just like aesthetic swagger. Like, he was playing more aggressive. He was using his feet more. That's my problem with Mariota, was he was too to the book. He was too structured. He was too my read doesn't tell me to take that one-on-one ball on the outside. My read tells me to take this check down, even though it's just going to result in my running back getting tackled 4 yards short of the line of scrimmage. He didn't use his legs as much as he should. In that one game for the Raiders, he looked like he did. I think Mariota does get traded. I think that the Raiders can get a second-round pick for Mariota from Chicago, New England, something like that. That's a great return for basically free for the Raiders. They signed him for almost nothing. So I think that he's starting somewhere next year. I think the second-round pick is too good for the Raiders to turn down because I don't think he's going to be an upgrade to Derek Carr. And if he is good, they'd have to pay him after this year anyway. So I think he's a good starting caliber player next year. I think he learned a few things. He's probably never going to completely rewrite his game, but I think he could be a playoff quarterback for the Bears or the Patriots next year. It's probably best case scenario. I believe in him. From Luke Olander, would Gardner Minshew or Mac Jones be effective for Matt Nagy's style of offense? 100%. Both those guys are really efficient in the short to intermediate game. They go through their progressions quickly. They let their playmakers make plays. I would say they probably could use a true run-after-catch threat. Maybe that'd be Cordarrelle Patterson, but I mean, Patterson's a free agent. They need like a Curtis Samuel, a Debo. There's plenty of those guys in this draft. You could maybe get one of the Moores, say, in the second round if you went with one of those guys. But yeah, they'd be a great fit. Matt Nagy runs that kind of West Coast, quick-hitting passing offense. I think Minshew and Mac Jones would be great options for the Bears. I think they could be a playoff team. Probably not a Super Bowl team, but I think they could be a playoff team with either of those guys at quarterback. From Zach, how realistic is this scenario if we don't acquire Watson? And in this case, I'm trying to figure out who we is. Trade second for Darnold, sign Jonnu Smith, and select Darisaw. Well, unfortunately, Zach, you didn't specify who we is, so I don't know who you're talking about. So I'm going to have to pass on your question. If you want to resubmit it for next show, I'd love to answer it. From Stuart McAdams, are you going to be updating last-gen Madden roster? How far will that support go? I'm going to need team help. So if you guys want to help with the roster, hit me up in the Discord. I do have a team for the last-gen Madden roster, but I'm only personally going to be working on the next-gen one. But it's not that it's impossible to get the last-gen one updated. So the plan is to get that done, but I am going to need help. So I'll just say that I'm going to need help for the old-gen Madden roster. From Kerr Hernandez, who do you predict the top 10 QBs of this decade will be based off of right now? Oh man, that's a lot. I'm just gonna do top 5 because top 10 is a lot. But of this decade, I mean, Rodgers got to be one, just from 2010 to 2020. Like, that was Rodgers in his prime. He's now won another MVP on the back end. I think, Mahomes has only played 2 seasons of the last decade. So I'm assuming you mean from 2010 to 2020. So, Mahomes sneaks into the list, but, like, if you're just looking at the whole decade, I don't think Mahomes is even in the top 5. I think you go Rodgers and Brady, 1 and 2 in that order. Because Brady was good, not great for a lot of years in there. Rodgers had some good, not great years, but you can point to a lot of like injury stuff for that. And the whole Mike McCarthy factor. So I go Rodgers, Brady. Russell Wilson would be 3. No, Drew Brees would be 3. Drew Brees was still incredible for the last decade. Then Russell, 4. And then that 5th spot, I want to give it to Andrew Luck, but I'm not going to go quite there. Maybe Rivers. Screw it. Let's give it to Andrew Luck because he was so good when he played. And he played from 2012 to 2018? Like, he was there for most of the decade. So I'll give it to Luck 5th. All right, from Daniel Jop. What's your take on Howie Roseman, and do you think they move on from if he has a really bad season? Yeah, if they have another bad year, I think they move on from Howie. I still believe in Howie. He's had some rough years, and he's definitely does not earn the benefit of the doubt anymore. That team is at a falling out with Carson Wentz. They have lost all of the benefit of the doubt. I still believe in Howie as a scout, but he's got to have a great year. From Jack Brown, I heard one of the PFF guys say that drafting Mac Jones at 15 is putting New England in QB's purgatory. Do you agree? Because I see good in Mac Jones, but the upside is almost non-existent. Upside's a funny word, and ironically, I saw a great quote from Mike Renner, ironically a PFF guy, saying that upside just means, when we say upside as a draft community, that just means he's athletic, right? But the best players at each position usually aren't the most athletic guys. Like, DeAndre Hopkins was an example. Richard Sherman. There's obviously cases of, Aaron Donald, Aaron Rodgers, the Alvin Kamara, for example. He's not the most physically gifted running back. He's the most talented running back. I don't know if he's the best quote-unquote running back, but upside's a funny word. I think it's overused because any player, if they work hard enough, if they have a baseline of athletic traits, which I think Mac Jones definitely does, they can be really good. Like, I don't think there's any real reason Mac Jones can't be Matt Ryan, why he can't be Tom Brady. Like, is it likely? No. I think Mac Jones is a really smart player. I was really impressed by Mac Jones. Obviously, there is that lack of physical traits. He played at Alabama, where he had the easiest job in the country. Like, yes, of course, there's all that stuff. Is it by default putting them in quarterback purgatory? Maybe, but you get 5 cheap years of Mac Jones. I'm not worried about paying. Like, the Patriots have a 68-year-old head coach. They have the pieces in place to have a great defense next year. They have a great offensive line. They could sign a receiver in free agency to open things up. If Mac Jones is the 16th best quarterback in the NFL for the best coached team in the league with an elite defense, and his contract allows them to upgrade other places because he's a rookie deal, they don't need to extend him. They don't need to overpay Mac Jones. Bill Belichick could retire. If you get 5 years of quality starting quarterback, that is a lot better than what they had with Cam Newton, for example, or where they're at right now. So, is it the most high upside pick? No, but it might be their best path to winning a Super Bowl with a quality quarterback and a cheap contract that allows you to build an elite team around him. which we know the Patriots can do, I disagree with that, like, quote-unquote, screwing New England. From REA Beats, after Herbert's stellar rookie year, what do you think he still has to work on? Where do I see his realistic ceiling? I would say, like, and you're putting this on me, so I'm not the one saying he's got a bad processor or, anything like that. But to be realistic of, like, if he wants to be a top 5 quarterback, he just needs to, like, continue to speed up the way he sees defenses. The natural development of any rookie. Needs to see defenses better, get rid of the ball at the right times, make the right throws on third down. I don't really have any real criticism of Justin Herbert. Like, he was awesome for a rookie. Now, the expectations change moving forward. He needs to continue to develop, but that's pretty much every rookie ever. So just the typical aspects of, like, recognizing coverages, being prepared for safety switches, looking off safeties, throwing with leverage away from defenders, like the really high level, fine detail things of being a passer are where Herbert has room to grow, basically. All right, last question here from Lions, the official TFG troll. Why don't you just say Wilson is QB1 at this point? Maybe I'm not bold enough. I don't know. I love Wilson, but I think Lawrence's ability to command the football is different. Like, his arm talent, accuracy, it's special. And when you're like Trevor Lawrence, and you can literally put the ball, when you can see the field the way he does, and you can see a 50-yard radius around the field, and with the flick of a wrist, you can put the ball wherever the hell you want it. That gives you such a great baseline. I love Zach Wilson. I think he's got a strong arm, but he doesn't have that same, like, command of the football. And I think Lawrence is, like, he's smart enough. I don't think he's quite as detailed as a passer as Zach Wilson, but I think he can get there. So I just think the physical traits for Lawrence, it's just really hard to pass on Wilson when I do think Wilson had better college tape. I do think he did, but I'm willing to project a little bit of growth there with Trevor Lawrence. And it's not like Lawrence had too many bad moments. There was the occasional, quote-unquote rookie mistake, but I'm just not. I love them both as prospects, but I'm not going to put Wilson over Lawrence just to make a point. Like, I love them both. And then also, why had your stance on shorter QBs changed every year with Baker, Kyler, Tua, and now Wilson? I never. I'm assuming that's a typo. Why has your chance? I just didn't like Baker. It wasn't because he was short. I didn't see his arm strength. And maybe because I was younger, I thought it was because of his height, I guess. But I feel like you're just using another opportunity to troll me about being wrong about Baker Mayfield, which you haven't dropped for 4 years there, Alex. We get it. I didn't see his arm strength. I don't think my stance on shorter QBs has changed all that much. Maybe it has. But if it has, it's just because of evidence. Or maybe it's because I was wrong about Baker and you're getting me to say what I wanted to. But I don't have anything against shorter quarterbacks. I loved me some Kyler. Love me some Zach Wilson. Luke Dale actually came back with a mailbag question. We got one more. Who do I think Seattle takes with their second-round pick this year? Great question. That's very difficult to come out and predict. I can tell you kind of where they should be looking. His offensive line is pretty deep in this class. Maybe go there in the second round. Maybe like an edge rusher. There's some depth in this edge rush class. Maybe like the kid out of Oklahoma who I like. Ronnie Perkins maybe. Or say Alex Leatherwood, something like that. I would say offensive line or edge is kind of what they're thinking. My next mock draft next Monday was a good transition to the end here of the show. Next Monday, Mock Draft Monday, I will be doing a 2-round mock draft. So you will get to see a Seattle Seahawks mock pick there. So that is the show. It's a ton of fun. I'm glad we got some good talking points out there. As we continue to go, there will be more and more draft talk. I'm still filling out the draft board. And once I'm really comfortable with each position, this podcast will be very draft oriented, especially as we get into March leading into April. A lot of my weekly topics will be talking about sleepers and, prospect primers and stuff like that, focusing on some of my favorite and least favorite players of the class. So you can definitely look forward to that. But I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you, everyone on Patreon, for the great questions. And we'll see you guys for the next one. This was the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I'm Marcus Whitman. We're heading out. And I'll see you guys tonight on Twitch, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our Texans rebuild. Peace. We'll see you later.